a bloc of countries against Venezuela. It is the first time that a U.S. Secretary of State has been to Guyana and Suriname. In the current scenario, Guyana and Suriname are in the middle of an international geopolitical dispute in which Brazil is following Washington's interest. Pompeo's visit will be short, about 3 hours and a half, but with a well-marked political intention since the U.S. government admitted that the main topic of the official agenda is to discuss Venezuela. For that reason, he will also meet with the Foreign Affairs Minister Ernesto Araujo. The tour has been questioned given that Pompeo will visit 3 countries bordering Venezuela, all of which are in line with Washington's hostile policy towards Caracas. After visiting Brazil, he will fly to Colombia, where he will have a contact with Colombian President Iván Duque. The database that will be used in the primary elections in Honduras in 2021 is not reliable, adding more fuel to the electoral crisis in this Central American country. The situation was informed by the National Electoral Council after receiving a report on this matter. The document says that as part of the Identifier Self-project, more than 1.4 million people have already registered, but more than 100,000 inconsistencies pending for rectification have been found during the process. The report sent to top electoral body notes that in order to carry out those actions in the electoral census, biometrical validation is necessary to verify that the fingerprints of citizens match those registered in the database. Bolivia's presidential candidate Luis Arce said that the movement towards socialism is the only viable solution to get the country out of the crisis. The MAS is the only political instrument that has the capacity, experience, and an accurate plan to get Bolivia out of the deep economic, social, and political crisis in which the de facto government has plunged us, he tweeted. Arce has supported former President Evo Morales, abruptly removed from office in November 2019, after a coup explained that with the unity and support of the people, we will move forward. Former Bolivian President Evo Morales also reacted on Twitter to the de facto government's President Janine Áñez's decision of withdrawing from the presidential race a month before the elections. Evo tweeted, "As we had warned, Áñez resigned her failed candidacy with a double betrayal of her militants and candidates. She had been determined for a long time. She only needed to negotiate her impunity." Former Bolivian President Evo Morales sent his admiration and respect to the Cuban people after thanking what its doctors has done for his country. Evo Morales, who considered the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, a father and the most supportive man in the world, told the Cuban press agency Prensa Latina that he remembers many moments with the Cuban leader and especially emphasized the Cuban doctors' work during his presidency. Days after the Morales coup on November 10, 2019, attacks against Cuban doctors began and the medical brigade, made up of 725 health professionals, ended its mission. Morales recalled that conversations with Fidel expressed that Cuba could operate 100,000 Latin Americans for free. Only in Bolivia, the Cuban doctors operated over 700,000 people for free. That, he stressed, is called solidarity. And the government of Cuba and the Institute of Music have rejected the media campaign against intellectuals and artists of the island, which according to investigations was conceived, directed and paid for the United States government. From Havana, Nayara Tardo brings us the details.
The renowned Cuban musician Alexander Abreu denounced through his Facebook account having received messages of hate, threats and racism as he defends, through his music, the principles of the Cuban revolutionary process, its system, culture and traditions.
Receiving those messages with so much hate makes me feel so blue. Why? Because I am a human being. I am a Cuban in every sense of the word.
Like Abreu, other intellectuals and artists of the island have been affected by a campaign launched from the United States ever since Donald Trump became president, who has allocated more than $22 million for subversion projects against Cuba since taking office on January 20th, 2017.
As you can see, these are attempts to harm Cuba in practically all areas that are important for the country's economic development. They have not been more successful and have not led to the collapse of our country because of the country's organizational capacity, because of the nature of our social system, and because of the experience we have gained over many years. But it should not be ignored that it is significant damage that affects Cuba's potential for development, the well-being of the whole population, and of course it is aimed at punishing the Cuban people.
Trump's administration has marked a setback in relations between Cuba and the U.S. by ending cultural and academic exchange projects, limiting travel licenses for such activities, and funding projects that seek to use Cuban musicians to build a network of young people seeking social change within the island through the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID.
And on the strictly artistic cultural level, the worst things that are happening come with shades of opinion that try to stigmatize the Cuban cultural policy. I believe that art breaks down borders and tends to establish bridges of communication between human beings beyond any system or any prohibition.
In the face of this wave of threats, several artists from Cuba have ratified their support for the Cuban social system and are demanding an end to U.S. policies that harm their country's development.
I support, thus, I say categorically, I support the lifting of the brutal blockade that the government of the United States imposes on my country. I support it, but not temporarily because of the epidemic. I support it every day. I believe it is inhumane. I believe it is murderous.
De pura cepa, y mis raíces las defiendo con la vida.
On Thursday, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel proposed to confront, based on the truth, identity and love, the media campaign of manipulation and hate against the intellectuals and artists of his country, organized from the United States, a country where demonstrations of racism have intensified recently with the increase of violent acts of segregation.
Nayara Tardo, TeleSUR, La Habana.
Thank you, Nayara, and we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The high-level video conference of the Economic and Social Council continues in the framework of the 75th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. The event involves some 20 head of state and government representatives, which will discuss the need of renewed sense of urgency, responsibility, and potential for transformation in the world within the framework of the 2030 Agenda. In this sense, the senior officials discussed the Sustainable Development Goals and plans to fight poverty and hunger, as well as to address the pandemic crisis, climate change, gender equality, among other aspects in the next 10 years. According to the agenda, participants will evaluate the mechanisms and actions to accelerate work and recovery actions related with the COVID-19 crisis. Hurricane-force winds and heavy rain battered several islands of the western coast of Greece, causing power outages and road closures Friday as authorities in nearby mainland areas remain on alert. A powerful tropical-like storm named Ianas was expected to reach the Greek mainland and parts of the southern Peloponnese region later Friday. The Civil Protection Authority said the western islands of Zakynthos, Kefalonia and Itaki have been the most affected by the storm. Schools are closed in many areas in western Greece, and authorities advise residents to remain indoors. And this Friday, tropical storm Noel made landfall in Vietnam, killing one person and injuring dozens more as it unleashed heavy rains and high winds on the country's central coastal region. Noel is the biggest storm of the year. According to Vietnamese forecasters, the storm was downgraded to a tropical depression late Friday. All airports in central Vietnam remain closed, while a ban on fishing vessels has been in place since Thursday. Vietnam's South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa held a meeting with their Vietnamese counterpart Pham Binh Minh on Friday to discuss bilateral cooperation between the two nations. Kang's two-day visit to Hanoi is being seen as an opportunity for the ministers to strengthen ties between the two Asian partners. South Korea is Vietnam's largest foreign investor and is also among the few countries with which Vietnam is resuming commercial flights after being grounded for months due to COVID-19 pandemic. On Friday, the Chinese government said it was conducting military exercises near the Taiwan Strait with the purpose of safeguarding national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Meanwhile, another U.S. official visited to Taiwan.
Regarding the situation of Crack's visit to Taiwan, I have already stated China's position, and the spokesperson of the Ministry of National Defense of China also responded to the relevant military exercise this morning. This exercise is a legitimate and necessary action taken in response to the current situation in the Taiwan Strait to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Taiwan is a sacred and inalienable part of China's territory. The Taiwan issue is purely China's internal affairs, and no outside interference is allowed. Any attempt to control China with Taiwan and to rely on foreign countries will be doomed to fail. China has a firm will, full confidence, and sufficient ability to thwart all external interference and separatist activities of Taiwan independence, and resolutely defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
The spokesperson also responded to the allegations of Chinese cyber attacks at a Spanish laboratory that is working on a COVID-19 vaccine prototype.
Hacking is a common threat faced by all countries. We hope that relevant parties will not jump to conclusions without concrete evidence. Investigation, collection of evidence, and crackdown on relevant issues should be carried out through channels such as dialogue or judicial assistance. China's vaccine research and development is in a leading position internationally. China does not need and will not rely on so-called stealing means to obtain any vaccine.
China has 11 COVID-19 vaccine candidates in different stages of human trials, 4 of which are in final testing and could be available by November. Preliminary results show the effectiveness of the vaccines to produce antibodies in less than a month after the first dose is administered. It is expected that these vaccines guarantee protection for 1 to 3 years. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. 9,000 refugees and asylum seekers have been affected by severe flooding in Niger since July this year. Many of the people lost everything and are now living in difficult conditions without food, water, shelter, hygiene, and sanitation. They are at risk of diseases like COVID-19, malaria, and cholera, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. This multilateral agency says it's doing what is possible to help, providing emergency assistance, but much more is needed, they said, and that situation is likely to worsen.
We don't have a place to sleep. We don't have access to sanitation and toilets. Our children don't have a good life. Our children are living in classrooms now. We are in a difficult situation. We need help. We have been in this situation for a long time. We need food, money, shelter. As refugees, we have lost hope.
Israel began a second full lockdown on Friday to try to contain a fresh outbreak of the coronavirus cases in the country. The decision comes as the country's government has been plagued by mismanagement of the situation. The 3-week lockdown will require the closure of many businesses and set strict limits on movement and public gatherings. Official figures on Friday showed more than 46,000 active cases, with at least 577 hospitalized in serious condition. To date, Israel has reported nearly 180,000 COVID-19 cases and 1,200 deaths. Ahead of the International Day of Peace, South Sudanese musician Simon Kero called on his country to forget conflict and live in peace. The International Day of Peace is marked by this year on September 21st. The United Nations mission in South Sudan said it was joining hands with these partners to bring voices advocating for a durable peace in the world's newest country, which continues to suffer from conflict, death, and displacement years after civil war ended. With a new transitional government of national unity in place, Kero, a 45-year-old South Sudanese singer, speaks about the pain experienced by the South Sudanese and lays out his vision of a country united by love and peace. And we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Laura Palmeiro. Thank you for watching.